deep blue. And those are dangerous words to speak in a loaded political environment. So it's got nothing to do with politics. Just to clear that up in the beginning. I want to introduce you through that title to an element of marine life, a sea snail, with the scientific name of Hexaplex tranquillus, Hexaplex tranquillus, also known as Murex tranquillus. And it's a snail that occurs in the Mediterranean Ocean on the northern coast of Israel, up to the waters of Lebanon on that coast as well. It's a very specific snail. There are a number of other subspecies in the main species of Murex snails. But this particular one, in its digestive gland, contains a very specific colorant that was very popular as a dye, very sought after. And divers would retrieve this from sometimes significant depth and bring it to the surface, and then you would crush the stone or the stone shell at a specific place to retrieve this gland. Or in the ancient times, what was more popular or more common is people would just boil these snails for a few days, and they would use salted water or urine to boil it in. And then they would get this dark blue colorant from this digestive gland of the snail. In archaeological digs up and down the coast there, archaeologists found huge mounds of the shell of this Hexaplex tranquillus snail. And it was the remnants or the evidence of industry of dyeing garments. When you say the dyeing industry, it sounds a bit strange, so let's say the industry of dyeing garments. Blue, it was very popular and very expensive, this dye. It was so expensive and valued that it was equally regarded with gold. So the same price paid for this dye and garments dyed in this as was gold. And even on Roman money, on Roman coins, you would see images of this snail portrayed there because of its high value. There was quite an industry in the trading of these garments dyed in this specific dye. And the Romans restricted it to the extent that only the emperor, shortly or early in the year 100 to 200, only the Roman emperor could wear garments of this specific color. The color derived from this dye was called tekelet in Hebrew. And that's also the word used in the scripture reading that we listened to. It says use the blue, and the word there is tekelet. And the fringes that are referred to in the passage that we listened to, that Ruth read for us, are tassels on the edges of Jewish garments. Now, those of you who have Jewish friends who still practice, you will see they wear a sort of a short apron quite often, where you have this, it's actually a light blue color, woven into the tassels quite often. Or they have a prayer shawl with tassels as well, and most often you also find this blue color, this tekelet, used in those fringes. After the Jewish temple, the second temple, that they built was destroyed in the year 70. The recipe for making this tekelet was lost. And for very long, the Jewish people didn't know how to prepare this or where to find it. It was written in the Talmud, the instructions were given, or it was referenced that you get it from a sea snail. But the specific way to prepare it for use in their garments, as I said, were lost. And then when Islam took over that part of the world with the religious wars, that further caused the garments often not to have this blue, but just be white or cream color, depending on the material that were used for the Jewish garments. There was a huge debate in Judaism about this color. Maimonides, probably the most famous Jewish philosopher, he said the color was not light blue, but it was actually very dark blue, almost black, like the night sky at midnight. And then there are others that said, no, this is a light blue, a very deep light blue, similar to what we find on the flag of Israel today, the nation of Israel, the state of Israel. On their flag, that blue. There was actually a rabbi, Isaac Herzog, in 1913. He did his PhD dissertation on this color. He later became the first chief rabbi of the state of Israel. So he did his PhD on this, and he said, even though the natural color from that gland of the snail gives you a very deep dark blue, almost black and sometimes purple, he still thinks it is the light blue that is reflected, that later were reflected in the flag of the nation of Israel. And a chemist, a few decades later, actually was successful in demonstrating that if you expose this tekelet substance in the right way to ultraviolet rays of the sun, that it actually produces that specific light blue. And that was the part of the recipe that was lost, how to treat that gland and the material derived from it, this tekelet, that it produces this light blue. The debate is not settled yet. There was an entrepreneurial rabbi in Poland in the previous age who saw a good business opportunity. And working with a chemist, he produced the light blue from a cuttlefish. So it was a marine animal, but he took some of the intestines of the cuttlefish, mixed it with another substance, and produced this light blue that he sold. And it was very popular because everybody wanted this specific color. In 2007, another chemist studied a piece of material that was found in the objects and the artifacts retrieved from Masada, that mountain fortress of King Herod that is famous for the Jewish holdouts against the Roman Empire in that period when they destroyed the temple as well. And after studying this material, he said, no, this is not the light blue, it's actually that dark blue. So that was the real color that the Bible refers to, the instruction that was given to Moses. So the debate carries on. And there are strong proponents of both sides of this. And I can carry on for a while. It fascinated me, this study of this specific blue. And I think when I'm doing that and boring you to death now with all the stories about this specific blue, I think we're losing track of what is important. If you look at the instructions given according to the book of Numbers to Moses there, I think we should heed that. Yes, use the kellet, use this blue. But remember why the blue is mentioned, why it should be used. The purpose of including this blue in an otherwise white or cream-colored or beige garment would be to remind the Israelites of the presence of God and of God's commandments. At some stage in the prayer ritual, when a Jewish man who has been bar mitzvahed, who is regarded as an adult in Jewish religious life, would open the prayer shawl and look at the tekelet, the blue. And opening that prayer shawl is like being reminded that God is present and that he who wears the prayer shawl should act in a holy way, should live a life dedicated to God and should live a life that reflects God's commandments. People teaching about the blue color said the sky blue, the light blue, like the Israeli flag, is a reminder of the sky as God's throne, a reminder of God's glory and God's presence everywhere. And those that say, no, it's actually the darker purple, says that is a reminder of the best time to come to God, when it is dark and you stand alone and naked like the midnight sky in relationship to God, in honesty and openness, with integrity before God. I think the Jewish people are fortunate to have that, to have a shawl or a garment where this blue color is a conscious reminder that you are in agreement with God to live in a certain way. It's a conscious reminder of God's presence and of God's glory all around us and also in us. The book of Numbers, the fourth book in the Bible, get its name in Christianity from the census of Israel mentioned there in the first few chapters, and then again in chapter 26 of the book. In Hebrew, it's called Hamidbar, which means, or Bemidbar, which means in the desert or in the wilderness. So it's a totally different name, and I think the Jewish name is actually better than the name that we give to that book. Because the book of Numbers, or the book in the wilderness, speaks of that period in Israel's history between Egypt, residing there in slavery, and the liberation on their way to the promised land. It speaks of that interim period in transition where they were moving from Egypt to the promised land. They were in the wilderness, in a difficult period of transition, because the book describes the interaction between God and God's people. God giving the commandments, Israel disobeying them. God giving the commandment, Israel disobeying it. I think for us as Christians today, it will be good for us to develop our own tekelet, our own deep blue, whether we want to make it a light deep blue or a dark one. that's not relevant, I think. What is important, there's some alert going. Flash flood warning, I think. Yeah, I silenced that one on my phone because this, what happened to me several times. When out of the blue, you get this blaring thing because my volume is always high on the phone. All right, are all the phones silenced? Right, let me try again then. I think we need our own tekelet as Christians, something that can remind us on a daily basis, practices or rituals, that we are God's people, that we are called to live in relationship with God as God's people, that we have the responsibility to obey God's demands or commandments, to respond to God's love and do what is right continuously, every day. I think we need those reminders on a daily basis, ingrained in our existence and in our activities, in all that we do, to remind us that it's not about the blue, the specific blue. It's not about which specific sea snail you can get it from, because you can get the similar color from plants. But the chemists have determined, no, this is not the real deal. This is not from the snail. So that wasn't as valuable like diamonds and zirconia. You know, the people that know which one is which. But we need something to remind us that we are supposed collectively to be the beloved community and individually. Like the people of Israel, when this command was given about the blue of the snail, of the murex snail, and the garment and the tassels where the blue should be interwoven with, we need something to remind us that we should embody, we should be a symbol of, and we should facilitate God's love and God's commandments. As individuals, we are always on a journey. We are always, if we are open to God's Spirit, being transformed, in the process of being changed. And collectively, as a church, as the body of Christ, we should also be open to embody God's love, to be a symbol of, to be pointing towards God's love and something that is sacred, that is beyond ourselves. These simple verses struck me. I read it, I can't remember when for the first time. I never read through the whole Bible. I never got past Numbers and Leviticus whenever I tried. But I remember reading this, and sometime I thought, okay, let me look into this. What's this blue? What does it mean? It's something simple. It's something that I think we have lost in our scurrying around, in our trying to make a living, in our trying to get ahead, in our concern, in our worry about the future and that of our children. That's something to live a hallowed life, where our full life as individuals and as a congregation, as a church. It reflects our understanding that we should embody the Spirit of Christ, that we should constantly be in that transition. And my hope is that we will find our own Murex color without having to kill so many sea snails, but walk as God's people, as God's families, as God's individuals, to embody that Spirit of Christ. Maybe it's especially needed now, in a time when tensions can run high. Maybe it's especially needed now for us to embody peace, to embody justice, to be guided by compassion, so that we may be individuals and we may be families and we may be a church of hope. May the sea snail help us to recall that, to remember that. Amen.